All right, welcome back, everybody. So we're picking up on lesson 1.2. It's the second part of adding integers with different signs. Okay, so now we have a little table here that summarizes the rules for adding integers. Okay, now when you have integers with the same signs, okay, when we're adding them, you're going to add the absolute values of the integers and use the common sign for the sum. All right, so in example, 3 plus 5 equals 8. All right, 3 and 5 are both positive numbers, right? Positive integers. When you add them together, you're going to get a positive answer, right? That's going to be bigger. It's more positive. The same thing is true when you're adding two negative integers, okay? If I take -2 plus a -7, it's going to give me -9. We have two negative integers. We add the two integers together, right? 2 plus 7 is 9. And because they're both negative integers, the answer stays negative, right? Because we're getting more negative, all right? Now, when they are different signs, like what we've been doing the previous lesson and moving forward here, we subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater absolute value and use the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value for the sum. Okay, so looking at 3 plus -5 equals -2. The number that has the greater absolute value would be 5, right? It is 5, -5. So you would go 5 take away 3 is 2. And because the -5 has the greater absolute value and is negative, the answer is negative. Okay, same thing looking at -10 plus 1 equals 9. -10, the absolute value would be 10. So 10 take away 1 is 9. And because -10 is the greater absolute value, right, meaning it's the furthest from 0 than 1 is, we keep the negative sign since it's a negative. And the answer would be -9. So kind of falling like into the rule of what I've been saying, when they're different signs, you're going to subtract them and keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Okay, the number with the greater absolute value. All right, so looking at the next one, it says a number and its opposite. All right, remember, that is when you have a 4 and a -4, right? Those are opposites. When you add those together, the sum is 0. Right? The opposite of any number is called its additive inverse. And we kind of talked about that in the first video, I believe. I gave you the definition of that, additive inverse, okay? So yes, 4 and -4, those are opposites. So when you add them together, you're going to get 0. In this, the one underneath, -11 plus 11 also equals 0. All right, they have the negative integer in front, but they're opposites. Okay, so when you combine them, you're going to get 0 every time. So let's go ahead and look at the examples they have for us to get a better understanding. All right, so in example 1, part A, okay, we're finding the sum, right? We have -11 plus 6. So I want to take my absolute value of -11. All right, the absolute value of -11 is +11, right? It's always going to be positive. Now I'm going to look at the next number, 6. The absolute value of 6 is just 6, +6. All right, now I want to subtract the lesser absolute value from the greater, right? This is the lesser. So I'm going to put that one second. So I'm going to go 11 take away 6, which is 5. Okay. Next, it says use the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. Okay, so which one had the greater absolute value, 11 or 6? Which one's farther from 0? 11 is, right? So I look at the sign for 11, and that's negative 11. Okay, so that means the answer is going to be a negative answer. That's how we get negative 5. Okay, think of it as in football terms, first play, you lose 11 yards, right? So you're negative 11 yards away from where you just were. The next play, you get 6 yards back. Well, you're still at negative 5 yards, right? You're still 5 yards from where you started. So you're negative. Okay, that's kind of a real world scenario for this equation. All right, so let's look at part B now. We have negative 37 plus 37. All right, so we're going to I'm going to take the absolute values again. All right, I have negative 37, and the absolute value is going to be positive 37, right? Because the absolute value is always positive. Now, when I take positive 37, the second one, and get my absolute value, 37. Now, they want us to take we're going to do just like we did up top, right? I'm going to subtract them. So 37 take away 37 is 0, right? Because the sum of a number and its opposite is 0. Okay, these are opposite numbers. Negative 37 and positive 37 are opposite numbers, right? And that's an additive inverse. So it's going to be 0 every time. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to look at a couple of the problems from the assignment, okay, to better help you complete the assignment on your own, especially the packet kids, right? Because you don't necessarily have me in class. So this would be an opportunity to kind of see how some of these get modeled out and answered, all right? And again, always contact me. You can always contact me. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next section. All right, so looking at number 1 on page 16, this section, they want us to use the number line to find each sum. Okay, so we're going to start off with number 1, and we have 9 plus negative 3. Okay, so from here, I want to go ahead and use my first number, right? Positive 9. That's where I'm going to start out on the number line. So I'm going to make a little mark here at 9, positive 9. Now I'm going to use the next number, right? It's a negative 3. And remember what I said before, if it's negative, we go left on the number line. If it's positive, we go right, okay? And just like your number line, 0 is what splits them in half, right? Your positives on the right side of 0, negatives on the left side. So let's go ahead and get back to this part. So we're at positive 9, and now I'm going to go negative 3. That's to the left 1, 2, 3 units, right? So we move 3 units to the left, and that takes us to positive 6. So that means our answer is positive 6. All right, so on this next section, they want us to circle the 0 pairs and then find the sum. Okay, and we're still on page 16. So let's look at the equation. We have negative 4 plus 5, right? So they already have our counters set up. The negative 4 is represented by these 4 negative counters, right? And our positive 5 is represented by 5 positive counters. Okay, so these are our positive, these are our negatives. Now, when I circle the 0 pairs, right, we got 2, 3, 4 of the 0 pairs, which doesn't matter how many we have. but each one of these cancels out, right? Each of these zero pairs cancel and become zero, right? Because we're getting rid of a positive and a negative together. So what's left over? All we have left is one positive counter, right? We have one positive counter left, which means our answer is 1. Okay, for the last section of page 16, figured we'd just use the digital whiteboard and just throw an example on here. So if I had, let's say, negative 17 plus 34, okay? Now, using the rules that we had, now we could use a number line, we could use counters, right? But that's a lot of little marks that you're going to have to make on a number line. And that's a lot of counters that you would have to write out, correct? So while those are effective and you could always use those, when the numbers start getting bigger, right, in as far as absolute value goes, those methods become a little harder to do, right? It takes a little bit more work. So sometimes just using the basic method, which in this case would be taking our absolute value of each one of these numbers, right? So if I took the absolute value of negative 17, I'm going to get positive 17, correct? So now I can look at my next number, 34, which is a positive, and I'm going to take the absolute value of that, which stays positive 34. Now, remember, we said whichever one has the greater absolute value. This one has the greater absolute value, so I want to put that one first, right? Because they're different signs. So I know I'm going to subtract them. So I'm going to put the one with the greater absolute value first, and then I'm going to subtract it to the next one, right? The next number. So now I have 34 take away 17. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and set this up, and we'll do a, column subtraction. So it's just a little bit easier. We'll take it back to elementary school here, right? So I have 4 take away 7. Well, I can't necessarily do that in this section with our ones, right? So I have to borrow from my tens. So I'm going to borrow from this 3 and turn it into a 2 or 20, right? Because it's in the tens value, 2 tens. And I'm going to bring that over here. So now I have 14. 14 take away 7 is 7, right? And then I just subtract our tens. 2 take away 1 is just 1. So my answer looks like it's going to be 17, but we got to check and see which value, or which was the greater absolute value, right? Which we said was positive 34, and we checked the sign. The sign is positive, which means our answer is positive. Okay, so that's just the way you're going to do this section, right? You can do this. If you really feel like doing number lines, more power to you, or using the counters, that's totally up to you. Okay, but this is a surefire method right here when you're adding integers with different signs.